proof that that's going right. And then if I give it 12 volt, it's...
I'm just going to rebuild the torque tube, change out the slave cylinder to a remote bleeder.
And that's after cleaning it a little bit. As you can see, there's a lot of connectors here on the transmission. One over here, there's one over there, there's another one down there. And this whole harness runs over the car to the ABS sensors right there. And obviously the other side as well. It's not as complicated as other cars, I would say. There's another sensor over here, but it's definitely no joke. You really got to know what you're doing and not forget to take anything off. There's the dreaded fuel transfer tube that everybody messes with under the car. So I'm super happy that I can do that with all that stuff out. Frame actually looks pretty nice. That factory heat shielding definitely needs a replacement. So yeah. We rebuilt the LS3 at Just Racing in Vegas, and there is a separate episode about that rebuild. So check that out because we won't be addressing it in this episode at all. Then there is, of course, the torque tube, which may be a little mysterious to people, but it's really pretty simple. This tube connects the transmission transaxle to the motor, and as you can see, the shifter is on top of it, and it has a spline on both sides. One side goes into the motor and one side goes into the trans. You take it all apart like this with a soft blow hammer after you remove the circlips. We're doing a dedicated video about this, but this is just the fast version. You take the tube out. I like to measure it so you know exactly that you're doing it right when it goes back in, because you don't want it riding on either side. So that's what mine measured like stock. And you want to heat up those bolts because they have like super strong Loctite in it. And people may say, yeah, just put some force in it, but you'll just snap off the tool. So you got to heat them up. I made the decision to run everything OEM, factory bearings, factory seals, and factory couplers. And as you can see over here, Nate is holding that piece over there, and that has seals in it so the dirt stays out. That's a center bushing that's a little hard to get out, so we made a little contraption there, and I put an upgraded bushing in there, and all of that info is going to be in that specific torque tube rebuild video right there. That's the seals over there, and I put some lithium grease in there, as you can see. So check out that video on the torque tube rebuild. There's a couple things I really wanted to address on the Corvette. Obviously, the torque tube, I don't want to keep rebuilding that all the time. So I put it back with these stands to have a look how much room I have, because I want to relocate the battery and I want to run the battery cable through the tunnel, and I want to heat isolate that tunnel as much as possible because Corvettes get really hot inside. And it heats up everything, especially if you're on an aftermarket exhaust. So I just want to see how much clearance I have everywhere with the torque tube in the car, and this is a really good way. Of course, we are running the TIC upgraded, like you can see it over there. It has that red billet piece in there, the nice little sleeve, which I like a little better than the plastic one. And yeah, it has the speed bleeder on it as well, which is a must-do thing. Like this sits somewhere close to your brake booster, and definitely makes it a lot easier because these things are not the easiest guys to bleed. I really wanted to upgrade to a dash 4 setup, but in this case, I'm thinking I might just clearance the torque tube over there a little bit so I can later on do that and see if I can get an adapter in there if I ever want to go to a dash 4. It's like similar to that adapter, but then it goes in here. So I could do that if I want to. It needs a little bit more clearance over there, so I'm probably going to do that. So what I like to do after you've rebuilt this whole torque tube, because you've touched everything in it, is check the clearance everywhere. And of course, you want to check the pilot bearing depth as well over there. You can see it's a little hard to tell, but that's super important. And there's a lot of people that are like, oh man, you don't need to do that, and it's the same motor and it's the same pilot bearing. change the pilot bearing, check the engagement of the pilot bearing. I've seen it so many times that people are like, it's the same part number, it's the same trans, it's the same torque tube, it's going to work. It might very well not work. I had guys that for some reason, like everything's been apart, right? Your crank's been apart, your torque tube's been apart. Anything could happen, any tiny deviation, or it stacks up. As you can see, there's only, where you see the yellow, there's only a couple millimeter, maybe 2-3 millimeter plate that you have. It needs to engage all the way, but it should not ride it. It should absolutely be completely loose, and not pushing on the crank at all. I see that so many times with builds that people have the thrust bearing worn out because there's incorrect pilot bearing depth. That's something you really don't want. And yes, these things have rubber guibos. Yes, they'll have a little bit of leeway, but just do it right. So sometimes if you don't have the tool, there's an easy way to check out how you want to air gap your clutch. You measure this distance, basically how deep your bell is. Then you put the bell on the torque tube and you put your throw-out bearing on top of that thing, and you measure the install height of the throw-out bearing to the edge of the bell, which in this case is 84.19. So that's basically the throw-out bearing edge to this edge of the bell housing, which is 84.19. Then you measure the total height of the bell and you subtract 84.19 from 168, and you end up with the install height of the throw-out bearing. Then you measure from the clutch fingers, the pressure plate fingers, until the same edge. There's tons of videos about it. I have a video on it as well, but this is more like an explanation of how I do it. You get 3 different numbers because it's an LS7 clutch and it's just a road car clutch. It's not like super precise. And they measure 79.29, 79.48, and 79.25, which averages 79.34. And if I subtract my install height, 83.81, from that, I end up with a little under 5 millimeter, which is perfect. Now, this is how stuff gets out of hand. I drilled a hole over there for one of these because I want to run my wideband over there. However, I didn't want to snake the lines right next to the headers, because the headers basically fill up the whole transmission tunnel, like at that section over there. So that's not really nice. I obviously use that grommet that's way up there for my handbrake lines, but my O2 sensor is going to be somewhere over here. If you look at the mid pipe, so that's going to suck. So I wanted to make one of these cable glands, which are like a watertight seal, and sealed it up. And there's no room in the center console. There's only one spot where it will go, which is right there, actually right there in front of the cup holder. So yeah, just one of those things. Like I always say, the packaging on the Corvettes is just very difficult, and it stays away from the torque tube. I'll show you guys how it looks like from underneath real quick. And that's where that guy comes out. And as you can see, there's only one spot because there's this piece of bracing over here. You can't go any further because that's where the cup holder is. So I was like, man, if I can get it a little bit inside the yellow line, I can't go any further than the black line. So yeah, I'm actually gonna glue the nut on here, remove this sound deadening, glue the nut on here so I can always thread it out from the top. Now that I have my grommet for the wideband, I wanted to add some more wires because it's going to be hard to add more wires later. I wanted to have a button for the fan control, and maybe I want to add some more gauges later. So I made this strand of wire so that we can later simply add maybe some kind of temperature gauge or whatever into the car. And of course, use the wire as a switch to turn on the relay for the fan, and have 2 extra wires for that. I like to use nice thick wire. So I pulled a bunch of the wire through. This is more than enough to get to any gauges if I ever wanted to like gauges or switches or something. So that's a lot of room there. This guy has plenty of space to go nicely to the pod that's going to go over there. So a lot of room there. And then we're going to be make sure that rubber's in there, that rubber seal. And then this guy just goes on top of it and seals it all off. And then we're running these guys through a heat sleeve. As you can see, it moves really easily through that heat sleeve, which is nice because it's not obviously there for heat, but more for like chafing, although there's no edges over there, and we folded the sound insulation around it, or like the heat and sound insulation. But you see how nice it moves through there. And once it's stuck with the P-clamps, it's got nowhere to go. And that's where I made that plus point. And yeah, you can think about it for 100 years, but like it's not going to be in harm's way for anything. It comes off really easily in case we have to take the tube off, and we're going to put some isolation around here so it can never short circuit on part of that steel structure. So these have 2 layers of crimp over them, heat shrink basically, and even heat shrunk the boot on it so it can't slide down or have like water or whatever coming into it. So you really don't want to mess with that because it's close to steel. We're obviously going to put some insulation close to it so it can't ever hit the steel if it would come loose. But yeah, plus cables you got to be really careful with and make sure that they are really never short anywhere. And that battery cable goes there because we are relocating the battery to the trunk, but I don't want to put it in the factory spot that the Z06 and those cars have. I actually want to put it right behind the seats. I have a couple reasons for that, which I'll explain to you guys later. But for now, we're using the brake over here to make a bracket that goes inside the special battery box to give it a little more strength. And I want to obviously mount this to the body because you don't want to have that battery coming into your head when you're having a crash. So that's what the piece looks like after I've done making it on the brake. As you can see, it fits really nice and was exactly where it had to go. I wanted to make another support that goes on the big beam that's right behind the seats, right over here. This is behind the driver's seat. And there's a reason behind it's behind the driver's seat, not behind the passenger seat. In the corner, you can see the ground I made, and those are the riv nuts that are actually going through the steel right above the tank. And there's only a couple spots where they can go, and I'll show you guys later. So now we're gonna make that bracket directly bolt into that thing, which is spaced out. And the reason it's spaced out is that then I can put nuts on the bolts and countersink them in those spacers. These are all countersunk holes. Yeah, so we'll have a really beefy mount for that deal over there. Then I recessed these guys so they would go over the nuts. Then these guys come out over here, and what the idea is actually to put these recessed washers on there. I made room in these washers for the heads of for the nuts basically, so these will sit nice and flush, and then this piece will go right in front of it like that. And then these guys will make sure that I don't have to hold a wrench behind it. Made a little thing over there so it will never spin, and that's how we can get the bolts that go through over there to go into this piece, and then it will be really secure against the bulkhead. And as you can see over here, we sealed off the hole that we made, so there's not going to be any water in there. So this is spaced out with that washer because like I said before, I didn't want to put the riv nuts into the plastic tub, but I wanted to put it into the steel right above the tank, and that's that ground point right over there. And there you can see the bolts over there, and there's the ground point, and that's the ones in there. You can see they are basically above the frame rail, so that's the tank is going to sit in this area, so it's not going to affect the tank. So this whole area we couldn't put any bolts because then it would be too close to the tank. As you can see over there, these do not cause any problem at all for the tank system, and neither does this guy, because this one sits low but it sits very far to the side, and that one sits up really high up, and they're obviously really flat bolt heads. Also did some heat and soundproofing on this side and on that side of the tunnel, and just to be sure I put some of that stuff over those riff nuts and that thing in case anything would catch, like a line or something. It would not catch on it, but it would like fly over, go over it. Yeah, so I think that's good, and there's no chance of any water or shit coming through there either. As you can see on our FD Corvette, that's where that tank sits. We obviously redid that, but that's still a stock tank. So there you can see yeah, how important it is to stay clear of that area. There is some room, of course. As you can see, it sits a lot lower than the frame rail. There you can see where the floor would sit, so a couple inches, but still you don't want to be in this area because there's all kinds of stuff for the pump. And that's how it came out with the carpet back over it. All the bolts are high strength bolts. As you can see, there is the bracket also bolted to that new support. I really wanted to put the battery over here because my passenger seat is a little further forward, and that way I can put two wheels in the trunk. A trickle charger hooked up there, hardwired into the car, makes it really easy. And this thing really sits really sturdy. I'm really happy about that. There you can see the line coming through the floor, and a perfect location for me. Crazy. That's what's going on over here. So these guys need to be guided out. This is always super dirty, I guess. There's the dreaded Corvette C6 fuel tank, and that's the big problem over here. So it's a little bit different than I thought. So these are lines that are attached to shit inside. I thought they were just in here. They kind of are. They kind of like click in there. So getting all this out is quite an ordeal. We actually had to split the assembly over there, and because it really does not go through this. This is, I guess it's swollen or something, so people can be like, yeah dude, just use a screwdriver. Yeah, I know, I've been doing this 20 years. Really hard to do. Those two lines, same thing. They have to come out with a pump still in the tank, so those clip off over here, and one is like pushed down there, goes through this little gray thing, then goes there. So that's a bunch of fiddling with that, actually. So this really is extremely hard to do. There's no other way to say it. You got to use one of these tools. It's just a little grabber. And you got to grab the hoses that are the other side of these guys that are dangling in the tank. One of them sits like that. That's like a siphon kind of deal. So that gray clamp that you see over there, that comes off, and then that thing goes into that cavity over there. It's super hard to see. It's even harder to do. So it's just super fiddly. It sucks ass. And then the other one goes right on there, which is hopefully a little bit easier to do. And you got to make sure that your orientation of your pump is still correct with the level sender. That's the other one you grab from out of the tank, and you attach it to that pump, and then you got to be really careful that your level sender is still correct, and that this guy is still in here, so that this guy does not like fall in or get like messed up or something like that. Now you want to take these guys off and replace them. They're pretty deep in there. I just took the yellow one out. That's the original ones. Pretty sure this is a part number for both because they come in the same package. So So there you go. I always hate it when people pull the camera away way too fast. You gotta pause it. So yeah, 1037 6929 original GM. And I don't think you can get these O-rings that are in here, and I don't really feel like taking them out because it looks like really weird. But if you pull this out, make sure that these are not like bad or deteriorated or whatever, because if they break off, your shit's gonna leak. And this actually seals, like the O-rings over there seal, obviously, because you're filling the tank from that side. You're filling it from here and it fills up over there. So that's how the two tank sides correspond. I also rewrapped this one with the Tesla stuff, and I put some dielectric grease into that connector. So if I ever want to take it off, it comes off really quickly and really easily, so you don't have to mess with it, because this stuff all gets, I need two hands to do that, but you get the picture. So yeah, this stuff can all be pretty stuck, you know. So those plastic things, you just need to snap in. Same over here, put some dielectric grease in there, or white lithium grease in there, sorry. Same here, dielectric grease in the connector, white lithium grease on the plastic connector, so it will come off easy over here. Same thing, the white stuff is white lithium grease, so it will just snap into the connector that's on the tube that goes from left to right pretty easily. So I use one of these tools to pick off the O-rings. Got to be really careful not to stab them, of course, and you guys are not stupid, but yeah, they look awesome. But I had my buddy Zach, he had leaks on them, and it's super dangerous because it's going to burn down the car. So make sure to get these, guys. So you have the tank back in, make sure that this guy is connected correctly. As you know, that was a little harder to take out. That one's on there. Over here, I want to test a little bit this connector. The red one is the 12 volt and the black one is the ground. So if you put the power probe on these guys, we can see if we did it right with our fuel pump. So I take the power probe, I put these prongs in there. So the gray one is the plus and the black one is the ground. I also marked it on that one. Put the hose into a canister, and then here you have proof that that's going right. And then if I give it 12 volt, it starts to shoot the fuel in there. And here you can see the torque tube test fitted, and the sound deadening and the extra wire for the battery relocation in there. And I also did some strategic soundproofing on the torque tube where the couplers sit so they don't get cooked by the exhaust. So I made an extra line over here that runs all the way through the tunnel. Put this thing over here so it's easier for the shifter to go over it, and that guy runs over there. It's got to be pushed in here, and then it's over there, and it's a -6. So if I ever want to run a system which has a return, then I can use that guy, which is now the feed line, as a return, and that guy as a feed, because they're roughly the same size, and that's the evap kind of deal. So this guy's gonna go ahead. Trying to hold that. This is still the factory stuff that I put over my stuff. So the whole tunnel is like that, because normally there's no stuff here. This is just steel. So I put the factory blanket back where it came from. So yeah, it should be sufficient heat deterrent over there. Man, yep, lots of heat stuff there. You can see that original blanket. Okay, so I put these strings up here, and I kind of aligned them with the subframe so I know where the subframe needs to go. Same as in the back. They're just over there hanging down, and the gravity on the nut that's on the end is gonna pinpoint basically where that point needs to be. So this needs to move to where that thing is hanging, and then at least you'll have kind of an idea of where the subframe needs to go and needs to sit to drop it down, because you can move it on the wheels obviously, but the closer you get, the better it is. The motor on the subframe, ref shift motor mounts, of course. Put the AC on because you really don't want to do that later. And yeah, now it's time to put the torque tube in its spot, and then yeah, I got to make a decision if I want to mount all the water pump and stuff back when the motor's still on the ground, or if I want to do it in the car, probably on the ground. If the bell attached to the torque tube over there, just got to make sure that it's not leaning on it or putting any pressure on it. As you can see, the front subframe is still kind of like in the right spot to get dropped on. And now the thing is the rear, and we got to get that shifter stick through and then somehow line up correctly with the input shaft right over there. So it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. Get these guys pretty aligned. What you want to look for is that this is on the same plane, and then make sure that that lines up. And of course you got to shimmy this guy through, which has to go into that thing at the same time right over here. So messing with the wheel a little bit with the rotor to move the input shaft, and it's lined up. Make sure that this gap stays the same space, like I kind of modulate with the jack, but obviously these planes should be the exact same angle, because this thing needs to go in there. And as you can see, you have a little more room before that guy goes in. So I pinched it in by hand, basically two hands, one over here, one over there, and just pinched it in, and the bolts all go in by hand. The dowels went in nicely, so I'm really happy with that. And it's really pretty easy because there is no clutch really. Obviously you don't want to pull it in by the bolts, just putting them in there just to make sure that they go in and that there's not like something messed up with the threads. Obviously they're the bolts that came out, but like you can never be careful enough. And this will also make it a little more straight, like for that last piece, but it's already so far engaged into that spline over there that yeah, it's basically got nowhere else to go. And this guy now goes in. As you can see, there's a bolt that goes through, and yeah, here you go. Cool. And these guys go to 37 foot-pound, same as the ones over there. One of the things I feared on the Corvette C6 for it being a good drift week car is of course the wiring, because it's still a GM product with a pretty cheap wiring loom. So I'm gonna be checking all of that out and upgrading that and making it more suitable. This whole thickest section of the loom, that's about 23 inches to where it stops, and that's where it splits off in this piece that goes to the passenger side, lower side of the block. That one sits in the bell housing, and then these guys, they snake up and they go to the cylinder head on the passenger side, and this is the cylinder head on the driver's side. And that's the one with that barcode on it. That one goes to the fuse box, and that's in the ECU area, and that's the ECU connectors, and that's the body connector. So this is obviously where things go wrong. That's where there's a lot of marks of being burned, and over here it's just falling apart, you know, it's just disintegrating. So I'm going to unwrap all of that and see if we can. I already put this thing on there last time I made it to shield it a little bit from chafing. Yeah, so we're going to be repairing all this stuff over here, making that a little nicer and a little more heat resistant here. Same thing, the stuff that goes over the bell housing is like super bad. There's no way to get to that with the torque tube and everything in the car. And then Wirecare actually came through with a lot of awesome stuff for this. Look at that stuff. That's just insane. Fireflex, it has the buttons, because I wasn't really crazy about the Velcro stuff, so this just comes off. Super nice. It comes in all different sizes, and they've got so much insanely cool stuff for wiring and insulating, and this stuff just all looks super high grade. It feels amazing. So I took that whole loom apart and replaced all the tape on it with this TISA tape, which is the same as OEMs use, like Mercedes, BMW. Just replaced all of the tape because it was all messed up. There's some factory heat shrink that was still good, obviously not over there. That's the piece that mounts directly to the bell housing on that bracket, and I put some anti-chafing stuff from Wirecare on there, and these are the Fireflex with the push buttons, which is really nice because if I ever want to do something over there with that wiring loom, it's very convenient. That stuff also goes over a clutch line and you don't have to take it off. It just slides right over it and then you close it off, and it actually, it's hard to tell where it closes. Super happy with this stuff. As you can see, it works really well for wiring looms that have branches on them, and on the Corvette there's a lot of little brackets and stuff, so it's really easy with this Fireflex stuff. There you can see how crowded it is over there with the NOx sensors and stuff. Time to put everything back in the car in the next episode. Thank you guys for watching so far. And don't forget, we are the go-to place for the best deals on Wisefab, Feel, quick change differentials, dog boxes, ASD handbrakes, CNR radiators, and so much other stuff that we retail worldwide. Hit us up for unbeatable deals. Send us an email or a DM on Instagram or whatever. Let me know and I can hook you up. I hope you have a fantastic day.